Welcome back to First Light. I'm your host, Chris Keller. Today we're joined by Chris Dreyer, founder and CEO of Rankings.io, the award winning SEO agency behind some of the fastest growing personal injury law firms in America. Chris is also the host of the Personal Injury Mastermind podcast and author of the best selling book, Niching Up. He's built an Inc. 5000 company 8 years running by doing one thing and doing it exceptionally well, helping PI firms dominate the court of Google. In this conversation, we're diving into what it really takes to stand out online, scale with focus, and build a business rooted in discipline, leadership, and mastery. All right, Chris, I want to thank you for joining me today on First Light. For those who may not know you, why don't you take a second to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm the CEO of Rankings.io. So we do digital marketing for about 250 firms across the US. Been slinging SEO since 2013.
Well, take us into how you got into SEO for attorneys back in 2013. I know you have a niched up book and you really niched down to a practice area. How'd you get into SEO? How'd you get into marketing? How'd you get into working with law firms?
Yeah, I don't know how far you want to go back. It's interesting. Like I grew up and I was poor, and I didn't know I was poor at the time. I think when you're like at one point when you started going to school and saw what other kids had and stuff, but like I was never without, right? And so even in the early days, my mom always had these side hustles. So she was a cook at a junior high, and we would clean a law school, or sorry, a law firm on the weekends. And that was just what I did. I didn't even know it was work. It was just like we did that every week. So that's kind of the way back in the day. And then it's like the older I got, it's like, well, what do these guys do? You know? and but so I've always been an entrepreneur. I have my uncle was very successful CEO and knew what was possible, and through him. And when I went to college, I was a big partier, didn't know what I wanted to do, just being transparent, and somehow ended up with a history education degree. I was really into sports. I was, I thought I was going to be a college basketball coach. Ended up getting a job at a high school. I was a JV basketball coach, and I typed in how to make money online, and I taught myself digital marketing. By the end of my second year, I was making like four times the amount I was teaching. So I quit that and started doing affiliate marketing, and went through some ups and downs, worked for a couple agencies, and just decided in 2013 it was time for me to hang my own shingle, so to speak. And when I was doing these consulting work, I was consulting for a lot of law firms on the side. I kind of fell into that, and it was just kind of a natural push to go into this area.
Well, take us through the journey because I know you've written books, host a podcast, you put on PimCon, which is an incredible event. I know you just had that.
Thank you.
So, kind of talk about that evolution from starting your company in 2013 to writing books, hosting conferences, hosting a podcast, all the things that you've done, which is absolutely incredible.
I my upbringing. I'll tell you this. It's like because I think this will explain a lot about me. Is my upbringing was like my father taught me that we only played the game to win, right? And if I played Yahtzee and I held the wrong dice and rolled the wrong dice, it was like a lesson of what dice I should have rolled. In what it didn't matter, basketball, baseball, and like we put in the work, right? I'm 6'3", so I'm not, but in terms of like basketball, that's not like a 6'5" or whatever. And I was a top player in our conference, top player, captain of the conference, and recruited at a very small school. So I took that same competitiveness right into business, and I want to do a good job. Like I think when you choose a niche, you choose to congregate with people, and like I don't want to be embarrassed to like see people. Like I want to be able to hold my head up high and say that I did my damnedest. Now, not everything goes right, but I know that I gave it my all. And that's the type of people I try to surround myself with. So in the beginning, I was bootstrapped. I didn't have much money. I made this big business plan, went to a bank, and they were going to give me basically no money. And I was so discouraged. And I called my sister. I didn't want to ask my sis for help. And she had her own company. She's like, "Well, I'll give you 15 grand for a few months. I'm like, okay. But I paid her back in that first like 5 months or so. And it's just been an evolution. Like I have no, I'm through and through SEO, right? I've been doing the SEO, search engine optimization, forever, but I also know paid media and branding and all these different components of just marketing. And it's just, I think I just saw a post the Diary of CEO guy made, the Stephen Bartlett. He's like, talks about like, hey, it's just doing it for a long period of time. And now look, I finally made it. And that's me. I have a habit. Every morning I get up at 5 a.m. On the way to work, I listen to a podcast or a business book every day, 50 to 100 books every year for 13 years. And the compounding of that is just have a tremendous impact. And, you get better. And just every year, just a little bit better, those lessons learned, and you just don't stop. I've taken some licks, right? Over hiring and those hard lessons, but it's just been a constant compounding investment, a lot of grit to get to where we're at.
When did you get that mindset shift and start waking up at 5 a.m.? Was that something that's always been with you as an athlete and growing up training, or was that something that you learned throughout the years and got into? Because obviously with my story, the 5 a.m. thing was recent, but that was kind of the life changing evolution for me. Was getting up early, having that morning time to really focus on learning and growing and developing. That's kind of what it sparked everything for me.
To me, I have like I've always done it in business, and it's a little psycho when I tell you this, but I am the epitome of, if someone is at my office before me, it like angers. Like I'm like, I've lost, right? I feel like I've lost, and it's the first in, last out. I know people say that, but I take that really serious. I think when you're a leader, you have to set a standard. You have to have the highest standards, and when people see that you work hard and you put in the reps and you ask them to do the same, they're more willing to do that for you. I think you naturally attract people that are like you, and so I've always done that. I've always been interested in business. I feel like that's my game that I play every day.
Yeah. So I know you've made the Inc. 5000 list year after year after year. Um, was there a certain point that kind of launched you, and something that happened that you can look back and say, yeah, that was the moment, that was the defining moment, or is it just that consistent effort of showing up every day?
It's a really good question. Every single year in 13 years, we've grew our gross revenue, um, every year, and I've reinvested back in the business. I know a lot of people take money off the table, or they'll do this and that, or they kind of settle. I heard a podcast interview recently with John Morgan, and he's like, he talks about being insatiable. That's me. That's not always a super healthy thing, right? But I think that if you are growing, it helps prevent the moving backwards, and you really do take the lessons learned serious, and you're humble and try to get better every day. It's also just you start to create leverage through the podcast. It has distribution. The amount of labor based leverage I have from the employees is more, and it creates this moat over time that's really hard to replicate unless you're just super capitalized. But I think for me, we've been Inc. 5000 8 years in a row. We'll definitely be ninth year next year. I think we really emphasize quality of work and doing good work, maintaining reputation. But recently, the big numbers on the board has been expanding sales. That's it's it used to be, look, I was a technician, just like a lot of lawyers are lawyers, and they don't want to market like that. That was me. Like I was an SEO guy, but about 5 or 6 years in, I'm like, hey, I need to market. I need to do sales, and that's where, I know it sounds cliche to say because everybody says that, but that's the truth. That's what happened to me.
What about the leap of faith into? Because I know for a lot of business owners, either getting onto TikTok or getting onto Instagram or shooting videos or starting a podcast or writing and publishing a book, or some of those, all those other things that gets their name out there, that personal brand. there's that self-doubt, there's that fear, insecurity, ego, whatever steps in the way that prevents them from doing it. What was the thing that kind of said, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to host a conference, I'm going to start a podcast and do all those types of things?
I tell my team, you got to do the hard things to grow. You got to be uncomfortable. Like we, even in my space right now, a lot of my competitors are selling. It's because there was a lot of uncertainty around SEO. Now we know kind of like, hey, AI search, and it's kind of applicable to that. But it's because I think when you're faced with that decision, and I mean, this is just a reality. Like, look, it's going to be hard. Like, there's a lot of uncertainty. Like, do I want to be uncomfortable? For me, the book, like, it's a great tactic for authority. Since I've had so many podcast interviews, I had a lot to say, and I had a lot of validation and great quotes to emphasize points. And that the PIM media side is something that I don't think people understand. It's the best compounding vehicle I have. It's the podcast has generated a book. The book has then, given me access to Amazon, which is a channel most people don't have access to. The other thing it's done is we have a newsletter. We have the social media from it. Now we have a magazine. We have a quarterly magazine that's really high end. And now we got the conference. We had a retreat. Blake was at the retreat we were at. So it just kind of compounds, and like every new podcast guest I get can get in this like ecosystem. But definitely a ton of fear. I get so sick. This is gonna make me sound like a big wuss. I'm so terrified to speak on stage, and I'm like sweating, like and I over prepare. But then once I get up there, I'm good. But it is, I don't like it. Some people like to speak on stage, but I don't like it, and I don't know what it is. Like, I talk to you, and I'm super comfortable on the pod, but when I get up on stage and the lights, and I don't know, it's just, I don't like it.
Well, let's debrief a little bit from PimCon, because I know you just had PimCon again, and saw, unfortunately I wasn't there this year, but I saw the videos and the show and production that you put on, the quality of the speakers that you have. Like, talk about what goes into putting that on, and then the purpose of it, the vision of it, of putting on a conference like that every year.
So Michael Mogul's a buddy of mine. I've seen the impact from an authority perspective of what Chris was able to do with a conference. And I had always wanted to do a conference. When I launched my business in 2013, I wanted to put on Legal Marcon. That was my thing. Now I have PimCon because injury has been my niche, so to speak. But the year before, so 2023, we went to 29 conferences and studied the conferences, what we liked, what we didn't like. So first of all, we went to as many legal conferences as we could and really tried to determine, like, how could we be different? Just like you look at different brands and things like that. Like, how can we have a conference that's different? There's so many conferences. If we're going to put a conference on, it has to be different because they got a lot of options. So that was step one. Step two was, if I'm going to do it and I have so much competition, I have to make it something that people will want to go to and want to talk about. So it can't be a 3 or 4 star hotel. It can't be just regular speakers. I have to invest. And truth be told, like the one last year, I think it was 1.6 million, I think we put in it last year. I did not have free $1.6 million to just go shell this out. Like, and we had David Spade, we had Michael Phelps. Like, those guys are expensive. Like, they are. And the Phoenician, our room in, our F&B, super high. So I knew that it was kind of like burn the boats. Like, I got to get people there. I got to sell the tickets, or else I'm like, I'm gonna have to just borrow some money, right? And that's kind of what into it is like, we looked at the competition. We had a really good strategy. We saw MTMP was doing the comedian thing versus other people like Lottie Girl, other people doing the concert thing. We saw that we preferred the main stage as opposed to the breakout sessions. It's we wanted to do invite our speakers and control the content as opposed to doing the pay to play game. And that's what it went into it is a lot of research and then basically just committing, putting that money down on the F&B and saying, "Okay, we're going."
So how do you get your team to execute? Because putting that on is no small feat. So talk about the execution, because so much of what separates people who make it, the winners, and the people who don't make it, it comes down to execution to be able to execute at a high level. So to put on something like that, you have to execute at a high level.
Yeah, I got a really good team and really good events team. I've got a great head of revenue, head of sales, and so the first conference, we gave away a lot of tickets just to get bodies there. I'm just going to be transparent, and it was like we had to. Like I don't know our ticket revenue that first year, and also the balance of attorneys to non-attorneys was maybe like 40%, 50% lawyers, and then the rest non-lawyers. Here I am owning a company where my prospect is a lawyer. That's not good. Also, the sponsors that sell the lawyers, that's not good. But I had to do what I had to do to get 400 plus people there. But because of that, the next year there was a lot of word of mouth, and we barely gave away any tickets. Like every ticket was sold, all the sponsorships sold out. We learned how to monetize the space a little bit better. Trust me, we have a lot of lessons this year too, but it was just easier the second year. I think like lawyers, doing the pro bono or the grassroots stuff and do it and just you know you get that word of mouth, and it just makes the second year easier.
Yeah. Well, let's shift a little bit to your business, because obviously, like attorneys, you know, I hate to say like attorneys are a dime a dozen, but there's one on every corner now. You get
Yep.
driving up down the road, there's a billboard after billboard, TV commercial, bus bench. There were personal injury attorneys are everywhere, depending obviously on kind of maybe on your market, but in advertising, marketing, SEO, there's a lot of digital agencies to choose from. So when someone's looking to hire a digital agency, what are they looking for, and why, how have you tested that tested time and been able to survive and go through all these changes that continue to happen? What's led to that success for you to differentiate yourself in the market and stand out and be that high performer?
The differentiation is going to be the legal niche expertise and the PI, the personal injury expertise. I don't. There's nobody that's as big as us that hasn't sold the PE. Scorpion and some of these others are bigger, but I think through the PEM media side, it's given us a method of getting in front of these individuals and actually using it as a feedback loop to really learn their pains and like what works and what doesn't work. So the personal injury expertise is definitely one. The the reputation, I think, if you go look at our reviews, they're pretty, through client service. And I will say this: when I some people are like, don't worry about your competitors, and just focus on yourself. Well, I think that can be an advantage. It can be, but it's also like when you're wanting to win, and it's a status orientation and a zero sum game. I want to know that our service is better. I want to know that the products that we're offering is better. So I analyze all the competitors. I know what they're offering. Like I know what their price points are. I know how they're differentiating. I know their distribution strategies, and I try to be. I mean, quite frankly, and it makes me sound like a psycho, but I try to beat them in every area, not just like SEO. Um, so that's yeah, it's just analyzing the competition and just continuing to improve. That's the biggest.
Well, I'll say one thing, because I know, early when I started my firm, I remember meeting with you. I remember having an opportunity to meet with you, and at the time, I couldn't afford your services. It was like, number one, I came from a firm that, I knew nothing about how they ran, how they got cases. I didn't know. anything about digital marketing, how much that worked. All I knew was referral mouth or word of mouth, right? That's all I knew. All
Hmm.
my cases came in from prior clients and from attorney referrals and other professional referrals. I'd never dabbled in this. I didn't know what it would cost. I didn't know the entry points. I didn't know anything. So I remember sitting with you, but you were very honest. You say, hey, you're a young guy, just starting your firm. My price point may not be right for you. I'm not necessarily for everyone, but I still remember that. And, you're like, just the honesty that you had, the transparency that you had, the time that you spent to give me some education was extremely valuable.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I just think it's again, it goes back to that, like, you choose a niche, you choose to congregate, and like, I just don't want to take an investment if I know that I can't generate an ROI, or feel confident that I can generate. We don't know, right? But like, sometimes the competition, you need a lot more production. I mean, just like, I think about, it makes a lot of sense when people think about it from a TV perspective. It's like, I need to saturate and get, certain amount of spend, but it's the same for SEO, backlinks, reviews, content.
Well, I can't have you on and not talk a little bit about the evolving landscape and the impact that AI is having. So, talk a little bit about kind of where you see marketing going in the personal injury world, or in general, for that matter.
That's a big one. That's a loaded one.
I know it's a loaded question, but
I think every year it just seems like attention's fragmented more. Back in the day, you had everyone was just on the double truck phone book ads, right? And then you had TV, radio, Google, and Facebook, right? Well, now you got TV and streaming. You got, several social media, and now you got AI. I just think that it's more important than ever to be omnipresent. I think that there needs to be intentionality about, doubling down on more channel in a certain channel that's producing more so than another. But it's difficult to utilize a standalone channel to really scale a business, especially if you're targeting auto accidents, right? If it's super niche down, dog bite, or nursing neglect, or negligent security, or something like that, like, okay, let's do just this one thing. But if you're going after auto, it's going to be take a full approach.
yeah. What about kind of the now with AI search? Are you seeing more and more people kind of go to ChatGPT as their source
Hmm.
versus Google? I know Google has their own AI now. It's kind of funny. I've seen certain AI that spits out one answer, and I go somewhere else and it gives me kind of another answer. So,
Yeah,
where do you see this evolution going?
really good question. So, first of all, if Google activates their ecosystem for AI, ChatGPT is at like 800 users a week. We're talking about 4 billion users a week through Google. So anyone that thinks that Google's on the out, when you start factoring in Gemini, Android, Waymo, Chrome, Gmail, they have a tremendous ecosystem. So, but a lot of, and especially if they make their AI mode the default, I mean, that's 4 billion users right there. So a lot of the tactics that you do from an SEO perspective are the same tactics that you would utilize to be discovered in AI. Now, someone may go to ChatGPT and ask these discovery type questions before they make a buying decision, but a lot of times they still go back to Google to convert, especially if you're looking for a local business. But if you're asking, like, hey, what do I need to do after a car accident? ChatGPT's probably got you, right? But if it's who's the best car accident lawyer near me, I would say a lot of those transactions are still occurring first and on Google.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of those early mistakes that you made. I know in growing your business, you talked about maybe some mistakes you made. Can you talk about some of those and kind of what you've learned, and if you could leave people with some advice today about growing a business, scaling a business, what would that be?
Geez, so many. Um,
Right.
so many. The
I'm still learning every day.
it's the bigger I get. One simple one is the bigger I get, the more important data is to make decisions. It's like, bad data is, uninformed or bad decisions. There's multiple points where, hey, the money's coming in and I just hire, and you overhire and you hit all your profit, and before you know it, you accrue a little debt. So At one point I'm doing the spreadsheet thing, and then I got to move to more formal accounting and financial planning and forecasting and capacity. And so I think one of the big ones for me was overhiring and not understanding true cash, acceleration cycles. That was at one point about 6 years in, a bad move or two could have hurt me pretty bad. Another thing recently, and like that I think about more, I heard my mentor Bobby Castro. He had a fintech company. He had a $1 billion exit, and he was just talking about the bigger I get, the more I'm going to be a target for lawsuits. So it's just thinking about that, like, because I have something to lose now. So our legal wasn't as tuned up, right? We don't have in-house legal, and like now we've got all the contracts and you know structures and additional insurance. We've got our own counsel. I've had some employee things. Unfortunately, it's like, hey, you sign the severance, and then they go solicit your clients, and it's like, I just paid you severance to not do this. And it was only a year. Could you have waited a year and a month? And things like that. But I think the biggest one is for me is overhiring or the incorrect hires.
Yeah. What about the biggest leadership lesson you've learned as being a leader? And you can talk about leading a business and or being an industry leader because you're honestly you're an industry leader out there.
I used to think that core values were a joke, and every time I heard them at somebody talking about core values on stage, I would be like puke my guts out. Like, let me get out of here and go back to business. But now I understand they're everything, because essentially core values are like what's important to me. And now we're hiring for people that meet our same standards and core values, and we're firing for those same reasons. Recently, I had a individual, and I'm trying not to disclose the department, but they're like, hey, at other companies, we would be being celebrated for this result, and at other companies, maybe you would, but not at ours. A different type of conversation, but I think recognizing that we need to take action more quickly. Sometimes we're a little slow to remove someone off the bus when they weren't the right fit, but now we're still not perfect at it, but we take action more quickly.
It sounds like data was not always a thing for you, and I don't think it is for a lot of business owners when they start. I know for me, I had no idea anything about data for the first 5 years in business, and now I'm constantly living in our data. What are the kind of important data points that you track, one as a business owner, and two that you think business owners should be tracking as it relates to their marketing efforts?
Marketing, so geez, I mean, the main thing that we're looking at on my side, it's a little bit different for lawyers, but we're looking at inbound and outbound leads. We're looking at, our win rate. We're looking at our sales cycle, how fast those convert, what our cost to acquire a client is, blended, what it is per channel, to make decisions on, like, hey, do I go do more Facebook ads for this webinar? Do I, do I build out my outbound team more? So those types of decisions, but really it's the CAC to value ratio is probably the most important for an agency. When you start dipping below a 4, you're in trouble, because it's just you're not getting enough. Like you have a leak in the boat, so to speak, or your marketing or sales isn't good enough. So it's just watching that number specifically, that CAC to value ratio.
It's you talked about getting up at 5 a.m. Let's talk about your day because you're doing podcast appearances, you're hosting podcasts, you're working on schedule seminars and events, and you're meeting clients. You're doing all the things. Kind of, how do you structure your days to achieve the success that you have?
I set that alarm 4:45. Like I'm up and I'm going. I hit the Starbucks. Right at 5 a.m. because that's when they open, and I used to do a little earlier, but then I was like, that's, I got to get there right at Starbucks opens, and the business books, things like that. I will say this: every single Friday, I do the three questions. What should I start doing? What should I stop doing? What should I keep doing? Every Friday. So I'll look at my calendar and be like, why did I have that on the calendar? Like, I shouldn't have done that. Why, why did I do this task? Why did you do that? And it kind of refines and prioritizes where my action should be. I heard I don't know if it was Elon or Kevin O'Leary talking about Elon, but basically he's talking about signal versus noise and identifying these constraints. And for me, it's like, what's the biggest issue at the company? That's where my attention is. It's like, I'm helping I'm not maybe solving it myself, but I'm helping my leaders solve it. And then it's like, it's that thing. And then I go to the next big constraint. And that's what I'm doing at all times.
Yeah. And last, what impact do you hope that you leave, one in your space, in your company, but then also, having niched into personal injury, the impact you're making in personal injury, what impact or legacy do you hope to leave in that market, in that industry?
That's a really good question. Let me think about that. The impact is I want people to be able to say, Chris had integrity. He did what he said he was going to do. He was transparent, and he worked his ass off. For myself personally, I want to leave a legacy for my son, my family. I want to give him the optionality to have a career if he wants it, for my company. Not to say he has to, and that's really what I'm hoping to do is take care of my family and leave a legacy for them.
Awesome. For those who want to connect with you, what's the best way to reach out? What are the best channels to get a hold of you?
I mean, best way to connect with me, I'm an inbox zero guy, is email. So chris@rankings.io. I'm probably most active on LinkedIn for social.
Yeah. All right, Chris. Hey, I appreciate you joining me today on First Light. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, buddy. Hey, thanks. What's so what is the kind of the review of the conference? I saw James up on stage.
Oh
I
yeah.
loved I loved his intro. I
Oh,
loved
he was awesome.
yeah.
I had I gave it a solid, so super high standards. I give it a solid BB plus. My team would get mad and they'd say, "Oh, it was an A." I think the speakers and everything was great. It was more so for me. There was a few things that are super small that had an impact. Like, we had a breakfast outside and not inside, so we lost a touch point for the sponsors there. We had too long of a lunch break, so people went to their rooms, and then it affected the session after. So it's just these little things that will, that just
Fine, dude.
carries, but great. We had excellent feedback. We got a 9 out of 10 on our NPS, and we're ready to roll next year. Super. I
I'm
think we're
hoping I
going to
get
do
the invite.
intake next year too. So we're going to introduce not just marketing a little bit, a few more on intake. It seemed like people are really interested in that topic.
Well, I'm hoping I get the invite to speak next year.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'd love to come and love to come be a part of it. So I was jealous James got the invite this year, not me. I was like, come on.
Well, you got to come on the pod too. You got to come on my pod.
Let
I
me
know we
know.
have
Send me
Blake
an
on, but
email.
yeah,
I'm
come
in.
on.
Yeah, come on. I mean, Blake or me. Let's go. Send me
Awesome.
an email. Let's do it. I'd love
Okay,
to.
let's do it. I'll shoot you an
Thanks,
email right
buddy.
after this.
All right, good to see you.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Chris, thanks for reminding us that mastery starts with focus and that consistency always beats complexity. For everyone listening, take today's insight to heart. When you choose your lane and commit to excellence, growth follows. If you want to learn more, check out Niching Up and the Personal Injury Mastermind podcast. And as always, keep showing up, keep growing, and keep shining your light.